Hi, Steve Stolberg here with monthly painting video number 61, made in Kuala Lumpur, January 2019. This month I'm doing something inspired by this photo here of a stairway. I started without a clear view of the end, like I often do for my Patreons. Simply retouching the original, as you see here, extending the stairs almost into infinity there, with a bit of an opening at the top for lighting effect, which I always search for some type of lighting effect I can put into an image. Just gives me an idea. It's easier for me to direct the lighting to make shadows when I know where the light is coming from, even just instinctively on a subconscious level, but I want it to be explicit, and often it just works very nicely. It works out very nicely when you have the actual light source inside of the image frame, so to speak. I added some people, just a generic threat, army people in this case, but I changed that. Here's the next version. Added is still a generic threat from above coming down the stairs with some victims or scared people at the bottom, and I developed that further. Working for some hours, I came up with more colorful light sources, as you'll see, and a kind of a spookier little hovering girl there instead of a big demon, you know, because it's spooky when seemingly not so powerful characters seem to have huge powers. You know, you don't expect it, and it's a bit spooky. And added some debris here, like she blew a hole up here in the building, debris falling down the stairs. So I start sketching here. Background color based on what I think the final most prevalent color will be, this kind of medium blue-gray here. It's all to aid speed and efficiency. Like, I don't want to start on a white background and start fiddly painting in, you know, paint by numbers. Maybe you've seen one of those guys do that. Sometimes, but you know, obviously that will take like 10 times longer than what I'm doing here. This is more like concept painting, maybe, except there is a lack of photo bashing and 3D bashing. Sometimes I do some 3D bashing, but not in this one. In this one, I actually could have built the stairs. Yeah, that could have been a good idea. I could have built the whole stairway and put in mannequins for the characters, and added the light sources and rendered it all out in Maya. Arnold, I love Arnold as a renderer. But again, that would have taken time, like right after the concepting stage, which I just described to you real briefly in the beginning here. Right after that, I would have spent, you know, many hours, several hours in 3D. And sometimes I can take the time to do that, but this time I thought, I have a fairly solid staircase that I can base it on, the photo, the original photo that I showed you. So and the lighting is okay there too, even though it's coming from the wrong direction. I had to change the lighting because here the lighting is coming from the above, you know, straight up here somewhere, which I've changed now. So I'm going to have a little bit of that lighting coming from above. There's going to be a red lantern there, or a cauldron, or whatever you call it, something that seems to be like glowing hot. Here I'm selecting out the characters, planning to start filling them up with a flat color. The flat color is obviously going to be the same as the background. Blue-gray is going to be what I anticipate the average to be, the average color of those characters. If you imagine having them finished in front of you and then just blurring the hell out of them, that color is what you want to start with, because it just takes an instant to fill it, and then after that it'll be much quicker to add the somewhat darker tones and the somewhat lighter tones. So here I'm starting the shading on the background. The little girl is obviously the light is coming from a lot from the opening in the wall, which I imagine to be daytime, just so that I could get some light coming through there. If it had been nighttime, it would have been difficult from a storytelling point of view to see that it actually was a hole in the wall there. So sometimes you have to just make decisions based on what's going to be more clear in the image, more clear story-wise. Here I'm changing the shape of this lantern type thing, which is going to glow red. I played with a couple of different shapes, but some guy on Facebook told me it looked like a Lego head at first, so I didn't go with that particular shape. I tried to make it a bit less Lego-y. And yeah, smoke. Later I decided to change the direction of that smoke, because you can see the girl's dress is blowing inward, which is natural, because if you open a big hole in a stuffy cave-like environment out to the outdoors, there might be a breeze flowing in from there. So the smoke was going in the wrong direction logically with regards to the rest of the image. And I got the pillar on a separate layer there, just to make it easier. And I'm shading the environment even more. You can see the main light source is this hole in the wall here, but this is a secondary light source right here. This red is going to cast some light locally here around this area. And I think this thing is made out of iron or ceramics. It can withstand a lot of heat, because it does look like it's hot. Maybe it's also colored red. I'm not sure about that. It could be a material that's colored red, but also somewhat glowing from inside, because there's a light source inside, or heat source inside. That's where the smoke is also coming from. It's just I like to add special effects to the images as much as possible. Smoke, you know, in this case God rays. We have a special effect here coming in from the outside. I imagine the environment to be slightly misty, foggy now because of the dust from the demolition that's been going on. And here's some lens flares. I'm drawing them from scratch. I didn't want to use the the lens flare filter, which has been much maligned in the past. But I felt like I did need some stuff like this here. It's on a layer. I'm going to reduce the opacity in a moment. But you need a little bit of rainbowy sort of colors. So pink, magenta, green, cyan. Just go around the color wheel and just randomly pick a few colors. Just don't apply them too strongly. And now I'm adding one more light source, just for the heck of it. A green one at the bottom of the stairs. So here's the light, the glow cast from the reddish light source here. This is basically, I'm detailing the pillar on the pillar layer. You can see the layers here. Pillar, railing, characters. I have a second set of characters here because they're in front of the pillar, and this one is behind the pillar. So that's why sometimes you have to split up certain groups of items into two layers like this, 1 and 2. Lens flares on its own layer. I have 2 layers for the lens flare right now. I'm about to drop them down into 1 layer later. Rubble and background. I'll add a few more layers later. The initial sketch is here, and these lines are the construction lines you saw me draw in the beginning for the perspective. And right now the sketch is visible at a lower opacity, and I'll remove it soon. There's a pattern I want to introduce here on both on the lantern cauldron and on the pillar. Yeah, I wanted a kind of similar pattern to them so that they look like they go together. And of course you only do one and then you copy it. That's you know, basic concept art 101 when you're in a hurry. You're always in a hurry when you do concept art, because the client is always waiting for his thing, and if that client isn't, the next client is. So you gotta keep going as fast as you can. And I'm gonna have to adjust some things on the pillar here in a minute because it's a little bit askew, because I didn't do a you saw the sketch is kind of rough, so I didn't do the full-on construction drawing, technical drawing sketch of the pillar first, but again, that's to save time. Sometimes you shoot yourself in the foot by saving time in the wrong way, but I think it went pretty well on this particular illustration here. I think I've learned through the years how to save time without screwing myself and losing time, you know. As we say in Swedish, sometimes the shortcut can be the long way around, you know. But yeah. So here I'm moving stuff around to make the pillar more correct in perspective. And then after, cleaning up, copy paste on a layer, cleaning up what's underneath, and then dropping the temporary copy paste down. Basically is what I'm doing. I find it a very quick way to work. The warp, the scale, skew and warp tools are really fantastic. Or just simply moving like I'm doing here. Copy paste move. Skew is very good for changing the angle of something straight and keeping it straight. Warp is very good for more organic, more complex changes that you want to make. You want to curve something that curves a little bit more curvier, then warp would be the one to use, not skew. Sometimes just non-proportional scale can work, like just grabbing one end of something and shortening it. Perspective also sometimes I use, not as much. Here I'm fading that what I just did a little bit. Here I'm also trying to create a little cast shadow. This is supposed to be an indentation in this stone here, so I'm keeping this all on one layer above the actual pillar for the moment. And right near the end I actually dropped, I think I dropped this layer down. I'm not sure now. Anyway, you gotta make sure the reflected light is not stronger than the original light source. So that's just one more logic thing you gotta keep track of. And when you do repetitive shapes like these stairs here, you just select every other stair like I've done, and then you work inside the selection first. And this is underneath the railing, so that's why you know, this railing is above the staircase, so I don't need to bother about that selected edge. And then you reverse the selection and work on the other set, odd and even selection, you could call it. And here I'm just working on the wall, on the sideboard kind of thing there. The rubble here is just really rough right now, and I think next I'm going to detail the rubble. Or yeah. Yep, starting on the rubble, detailing the rubble. This is tricky because nature would have chaotically created this rubble in a very natural way. It would look, real rubble will look very natural, and it can look very beautiful for some reason. I'm not sure exactly why, but when a human tries to replicate that, sometimes it just looks stiff and ugly, and like right now it's looking like some kind of weird coral reef thing that isn't really, that has grown like that, which is not at all what I'm after. That doesn't look like rubble at all. Rubble is more chaotic than a coral reef. And also it's a little bit too detailed, so I had to smooth out some of those squiggly bits there. Yeah, like that. But it's cool to add a little bit too much crazy permutations in the beginning, and then scale them back towards the end. So that's why if you're wondering like, why did this process take so much time, it's speeded up of course, but you can tell I'm spending a lot of time on these rubble bits here. That's because of this problem that when humans try to do something chaotic and random, it just very, very easily doesn't look chaotic and random at all. So yeah, that's the problem. So I had to second guess myself there several times, and I think I'm coming back to the rubble as well, adding some light effects here. Well, it looks like I was done with the rubble for the moment. I might have gone back to it later without recording it. Not sure. I don't remember. But I'm detailing the railing here. At first very roughly, and then of course gradually more with some selection. Selection is like the most precise way you can add shading to something. And then detailing the girl. She has a sheer nightgown on just because it would catch the light more than burlap or canvas or cotton or jeans or whatever else she would be wearing. To me would be less interesting, more boring. So yeah, I tried to do something more interesting with the lighting here, which works quite well because you see the background here is a little bit darker. The sheer material would catch the light from here, so it stands out just enough against the background to be quite interesting, while still allowing to see what's inside a little bit like that, which was also interesting. Bringing up the saturation a little bit there, painting the face. The hair reacts in a kind of similar way to the light as the material of the dress, nightgown, or whatever it is. And the strong woman, she has a metallic dress on, so highlights on metallic material is always more saturated than the rest of the material. So you see I'm just working with, I'm gonna raise the saturation on that red later as well, even higher. Yeah, there it goes. And I think maybe even more than this. I don't do paint by numbers. Like I don't add the final strength of the paint stroke usually the first time I hit it, so I have to sort of split it up in stages, in phases, like stage 1, stage 2, stage 3, darker. If I'm going darker with something, I don't do it super dark right away. I go gradually, step by step. This is just the way that I work. Some people may be able to go all the way to 100% of the intended effect right away with the first paint stroke, but I usually split it up into stages like this. And the same here with the lighting on her skin. You'll see if you compare to the final, I have actually strengthened the lighting a lot on the skin. In fact, overall contrast usually increases over the time from the beginning to the end in my paintings. Like the lights go lighter, the saturation goes stronger, the dark go darker, stuff like that. I'm not sure what the story is here, but it seems like she tried to go up against the little girl who has powers with nothing but a knife and her muscles. I'm not sure who's evil and who's good in this image. Maybe the little girl is evil, maybe she's good. I hadn't really thought that far about writing a whole story about it. It just sort of came together when it felt like a story. That's when I started painting. I haven't really decided on what exactly the story is yet, although I might someday. Shading the other women, the naked women. So that was the darker parts, and here come the lighter parts. You see how much quicker? Can you imagine how slow this would have been if I'd started at the top with this exact tone and then just gone slowly down, kept changing my tone, lighter, darker, lighter, darker, lighter, darker, you know, paint by numbers is what you could call that. This is just quicker, yeah. And I'll add some like transparent, like in the old days when they were doing oil paintings, they would have a wash, they would have, or you could compare it to watercolors as well. I'll add some semi-transparent tones across here later to the same thing I did in the beginning when I was using the airbrush to darken this area here. I don't press too hard, and in fact I even use the fade tool, which is inside of the edit menu. There's a fade tool where you can fade. I've talked about this many times before. You can see in my other videos, and you'll see me using it here too, probably quite a few times, because it's my favorite way to apply a strong stroke and then to mediate it, to reduce it in strength, which goes together with my philosophy of not applying 100% from the start, but to sort of gradually sneak up on your desired final result. So this one is nearly done now, and then I'm gonna go to the next character. See, I did it right there. I added black across the whole thing, and then I faded it out almost down to 0, but not quite. Same thing with this red, fading it down, adding it, fading it down, adding it, fading it down. This way you split up the problem for the brain to handle in two. First you decide exactly where to place the stroke, and then when that's decided, that's taken care of, you don't have to worry about that anymore, then you go and decide how strong it should be. Two separate actions instead of one single action, double action. Which is harder for the brain to focus on, to handle, because yeah, multitasking is not my strength. And here I made a mistake. I painted without the lock, the opacity lock on, so I had to quickly remove the extraneous paint strokes, and I'm just making sure I didn't remove it too much. So that mistake fixed. Now I'm back to using the airbrush at first, which I find is a very ugly tool to use. You can see here how ugly the shapes of the strokes are just ugh. But as you work it more, you add the highlights here a little bit, and now I'm adding brush strokes, like real brushy strokes on top of it. So just need to get rid of that airbrush look, you know. And it's not too hard to do, because you use a textured brush in the later stages, and then now just right away now it just looks so much better, because I've covered pretty much all of the airbrush things I did in the beginning with some more textured strokes here. But there's still some edges that are too sharp that I will keep working on, like here for instance. And I will also add some perspective to this person, not to the one behind her, but to her, because her lower body is too small and her upper body is too big. So I applied a little bit of perspective, and also I think I shrunk her hair down a little bit by just selecting the top of her head, top of her hairdo, and push the hair down a bit, stuff like that. Here I'm just going even further into details. There's an airbrush line there that I'm fading out, just to get rid of that the sharp edges, which are not really nice. Again here using the fade function. Just trying to make a part of that wall slightly different from the rest of the wall. I think I added something that looked like bars there later, right at the end. I'm adding texture to the walls. I'll be adding another handrail here in a moment. You can see in the sketch, it's there in the sketch. Adding a line on the floor there. And here's the handrail. First, just a simple handrail, simple flat color, and then copy paste, make another layer, blur the one underneath, darken it to get a shadow, to get a cast shadow. There's the blurry going on. Now of course I have to reduce the size at the top. I'm skewing it there, reducing the size at the top and just reducing the opacity so it's just a hint. It makes the handrail just kind of sit, quotation marks, sit on the wall more solidly. Here I'm selecting every other row of masonry to start the process of adding even more texture, adding the slight differences of coloration which will happen at the edges between different stones in the wall. And then invert, and I will first I add dark and I also add lighter colors, and then I invert and I do the same thing on the next one, adding vertical lines here also between the stones. Of course I could spend much more time on this, but these visual hints are enough to make it look like you know, everybody who sees it will say, oh, stone wall, okay, I get it, you know, subconsciously. You don't even have to say that out loud. I see, it's a stone wall. But you know what I mean. It's just visual hints. Like, what material is it? Big stones. Okay, big square rectangular stones. Okay, solid. Like a medieval castle or whatever, you know. If I wanted it to be brick, that would have been, I would not, you know, paint every single brick. Again, I would do some hints and then fade out the hints, and so just enough so that people would understand the entire wall is brick. I don't have to worry about counting the bricks, but I can see that it's brick. And that's done already. And yeah, as you can see here now, I'll just stop the video. I increased saturation, I increased contrast. I've been playing for, I've probably played like for an hour with the levels of the image, and ended up with this, which is a bit darker in the shadows and a bit more saturated in the colors than the last version that you just saw. Yeah, hope you like it. Let me know if you have any feedback or questions. Thanks for your support, and see you next month. Bye.